My husband, who served as the captain of a special operations team, became a vegetative patient due to a mission, and a few days later, he was declared brain dead. In my previous life, I remained devoted and insisted on sustaining his life with machines, only to be pushed down the stairs by him, resulting in immediate death. In my second life, I saw through everything and applied for a transfer, but on the way out, I was struck head-on by him and sent flying. Before dying, I asked him why. He replied with a face full of disgust, "It's because your father is a general that Melissa and I were separated, that's your sin. Only if you die can Melissa be with me, and I can still be the general's son-in-law." Only then did I realize he had never intended for me to live. Upon receiving the notification of Gavin's brain death again, I looked toward the attending physician, Melissa, not far away. Without hesitation, I stated, "In that case, issue a death certificate immediately." Given Gavin's circumstances, applying for a first-class merit citation to superiors should pose no issue. At that time, invite the leaders to attend the funeral together, and ensure it is conducted with great pomp. Since he wanted to feign death, I would make him truly dead. As my words fell, Melissa's expression changed abruptly. She quickly stepped forward, blocking the hospital bed. "Dear family member, please remain calm. Although the patient is brain dead, we can still maintain his vital signs with instruments. As long as there is a sliver of hope, we doctors will not give up." Watching her hypocritical demeanor, I sneered inwardly. She was putting on quite a convincing act. In my first life, I had believed her nonsense and chosen to sustain Gavin's life with machines. What was the result? Gavin was not dead at all. He and his first love, Melissa, had colluded internally and externally, administering a fake death drug, meticulously orchestrating this elaborate escape plan. Upon his discharge and awakening, the first thing he did was push me down the stairs. I suffered an immediate cervical fracture and died untreated. And the murderer? A vegetative patient? Who would believe that? Not only did he evade justice, but he also garnered sympathy from my general father by feigning grief over his wife's death, advancing rapidly in his career. Recalling my father's later misery of outliving his child, my heart ached as if pierced by knives, and hatred surged. In this life, I would absolutely deny them any opportunity. I stated solemnly, "No need, my husband Gavin died in the line of duty, with irrefutable evidence. I now request a death certificate for him and apply for martyr status." Melissa froze in place, forcing an expression of pity and disapproval on her face. "I understand your grief, but isn't directly abandoning treatment too hasty? The patient is still young, perhaps a miracle could occur? You are husband and wife, are you unwilling to give him even the last bit of hope?" She deliberately emphasized the word couple, as if accusing me of being cold-blooded and heartless. The corners of my mouth curled into a mocking arc. "It seems your hospital should strengthen basic knowledge training." My words stunned her. Without waiting for Melissa to react, I continued, "Brain death, namely the irreversible cessation of all brain functions including brainstem functions, constitutes death in the legal sense. There are no medical miracles in such cases. As a doctor, what is your intention in conveying meaningless hope to the family when the patient's death is clearly established?" After speaking, I no longer looked at Melissa's pallid face, my voice broking no argument. "Please immediately cease all instrumental equipment. My husband is a warrior who sacrificed honorably, he should depart with dignity, not lie on the hospital bed as a specimen." Faced with my resolute attitude and irrefutable medical facts, the hospital administration finally nodded in agreement. Melissa remained rigid in place, watching helplessly as the nurses began operations, her eyes filled with panic. I quietly arranged Gavin's military uniform as the ward door was gently pushed open. Led by the division commander, 5 or 6 military leaders including the political commissar and chief of staff entered with solemn expressions. The division commander's voice was heavy with sorrow. "Serena, you must restrain your grief and take care of your health. Gavin was a good soldier. The organization will certainly handle his posthumous affairs properly and provide you with an explanation." I raised my head, my face devoid of tears, only showing resolve. "Leaders, as Gavin's wife, I wish to apply for a first-class merit for him and request the organization to hold a grand funeral. As my words concluded, the ward fell silent. The leaders exchanged surprised glances. They had not expected me to be so composed, suppressing my heartache to consider my husband's posthumous matters. Melissa immediately stood out from the corner, her expression anxious. "Dear family member, I know you are upset, but merit evaluation is a matter for the organization to consider." I knew what she was worried about. Once the martyr title was conferred, it would officially confirm Gavin's death at the national level. All subsequent plans she and Gavin had would become utterly unfeasible. Thus, I directly ignored her, meeting the leaders' gazes openly and articulating clearly Gavin's achievements that met the criteria for first-class merit. The leaders transitioned from surprise to solemnity, then to being moved. "Serena, you are right. It was our oversight." The political commissar's voice was resolute. "This first-class merit must be applied for." The division commander also nodded emphatically, his gaze toward me filled with admiration. "Serena, at such a time, you can still calmly fight for the honors your husband deserves. Gavin marrying you was his fortune." The other leaders echoed in agreement, their looks toward me filled with respect. Melissa was completely sidelined, unable to utter a single rebuttal. She could only watch helplessly as the leaders decided on the spot to proceed with the first-class merit application and funeral arrangements. With matters settled, I turned to the division commander and made one final request. "Leaders, according to regulations, the remains of sacrificed soldiers may be retrieved by family. Now that brain death has been determined, please allow me to take Gavin home today." The division commander immediately agreed and arranged personnel to assist. I took one last look at the handsome face on the hospital bed, my expression blank. "Using fake death as a ploy? Then I will give you a grand funeral, nailing you and your conspiracy together onto the hero's tombstone." The real show had just begun. As expected, my in-laws had received advance notice from Melissa and were at home, wailing and making a scene. My mother-in-law slapped her thigh and held, "My son. My poor son. Open your eyes and look. You heartless daughter-in-law, she doesn't want you to live. She's taking your life." My father-in-law pointed at my nose, trembling with rage. "What sin did our Gu family commit to marry such a cold-blooded creature like you? The doctors said he could still be maintained, but you insist on pulling the plug. This is murder. You are the killer who harmed my son." In my previous life, facing such indiscriminate accusations, I would only feel heartache. But now, my heart was filled only with calm. I produced the death certificate issued by the hospital and said sternly, "Dad, Mom, this is the death certificate from the hospital, in black and white, clearly written. You keep saying I'm cold-blooded, that I'm heartless. Then let me ask you, insisting on tying Gavin to these machines like an object, letting him lie there neither human nor ghost, is that loving him?" I raised my hand to point at Gavin's military uniform photo on the wall. "Your son Gavin is a warrior, a hero who stands tall. He shouldn't lie in the hospital like a living dead, making you uncomfortable and worrying the troops. What you are doing now is tarnishing his sacrifice, insulting his military identity." These words directly occupied the moral and emotional high ground. My in-laws were instantly speechless. My mother-in-law's lips trembled for a long while before she could only shout hoarsely, "Fine. Even if you're right. But we can't just cremate him like this. I want to take my son home and preserve him in an ice coffin. What if there's a miracle in the future? Maybe one day medicine will advance enough to save him." My father-in-law immediately chimed in, "Yes. Preserve him. We can't just give up on my son like this." I almost laughed out loud. Preserving the body? It was merely a stalling tactic by Melissa and Gavin to buy time. In my second life, to evade Gavin's murder, I directly applied for a transfer. Unexpectedly, I was still run over and killed by Gavin driving. Before dying, Gavin smugly recounted all the plans. Besides his accomplice Melissa, my in-laws were also in the know. Their current tantrums were all to buy time for Gavin to awaken. Once Gavin woke up, what awaited me would be a third meticulously planned accident. I could delay no longer. I took a deep breath, my tone calm. Dad, Mom, you needn't argue anymore. Gavin must be cremated immediately. The room fell silent instantly. My in-laws' expressions changed, and they were about to curse again. I slowly retrieved a handwritten letter from my carry bag. That was the will Gavin had personally written after his brief awakening in the hospital, to establish his devoted persona. Assuming an expression of suppressed grief, I read aloud, "If life becomes a burden, I would rather end it with dignity than become a drag on those I love. Please let me depart quietly and with dignity." I put away the will, my gaze sweeping over my in-laws' instantly ashen faces. This is Gavin's final wish. Immediate cremation, allowing him to depart with dignity, is truly loving him. What you are doing now, stirring up trouble, is it to satisfy your own reluctance, or have you not considered Gavin's wishes at all? This counterattack left my in-laws gaping, unable to utter a word. What could they say? Could they deny their own son's final wish? Watching my in-laws' panicked eyes, I sneered inwardly. Gavin, every word you used to build your persona has now become the death warrant sending you on your way. You can't escape this fire. Powerless to obstruct, my in-laws had to agree to hold the funeral. My mother-in-law, with red eyes, insisted on observing the 3-day vigil according to hometown customs, clearly aiming to delay. I understood inwardly but consented outwardly. Late at night, the morning hall was solemn, with candle flames flickering. My in-laws pretended to accompany me in the vigil. My mother-in-law even held my hand, hypocritically wiping tears. "Serena, you are still young. Once Gavin's affairs are settled, just find a good man to remarry. Your dad and I support you." Looking at her hypocritical teary eyes, I felt a wave of nausea. In my first life, when I was pushed down the stairs to my death, they were the first to jump out, wailing that it was all due to my excessive grief and mental distraction leading to an accidental fall. Now, they were advising me to remarry? This family was rotten to the core. "I'm feeling a bit unwell, I'll rest for a while first." I shook off my mother-in-law's hand, unwilling to continue this charade with these vipers. I turned to leave the morning hall but did not go far, merely hiding by the door. As expected, upon seeing me leave, my mother-in-law immediately approached the coffin. She lowered her voice, "Gavin, my son, wake up quickly. Once you're awake, we can find an opportunity to kill that woman. Her property, her father's resources, will all be ours. Yes. Wake up quickly, no more delays." My father-in-law anxiously echoed. In the darkness, my nails dug deeply into my palms. This pain made me extraordinarily clear-headed. The last trace of faint hesitation from personally sending my husband to cremation vanished completely. "You want me dead, want my property? Fine, I'll send your precious son on his way right now." Exhausted from consecutive days, my in-laws finally returned to their room to rest, leaving me alone in the morning hall. I approached the coffin, looking at Gavin's serene remains, my gaze ice-cold. I quickly retrieved the fake death agent I had swapped from Melissa's office. Under the guise of arranging the remains, I adjusted to a double dose and precisely injected it into Gavin's neck side, delaying his awakening time. As dawn broke, the funeral proceeded on schedule. Military district leaders and comrades arrived successively. Dressed in solemn black, my face sorrowful yet composed, I earned everyone's admiration. "Restrain your grief, Serena, you are exemplary." The division commander consoled me with red-rimmed eyes. I nodded slightly, my gaze sweeping over the ashen-faced in-laws and Melissa at the back of the crowd. Commence the procession, I personally draped the party flag, watching the coffin being steadily lifted. The hearse started, slowly heading toward the crematorium amid solemn military salutes. Sitting in the car, I couldn't help glancing at my wristwatch. Time was running short. I must witness Gavin being sent into the incinerator before the fake death effect wore off. Otherwise, the tragic deaths of my previous 2 lives would be my fate. Just as the convoy accelerated toward the crematorium, my in-laws suddenly rushed out from the roadside. They spread their arms, blocking the hearse firmly. "Stop. Stop for me." My mother-in-law threw her entire body onto the hood, pounding the window forcefully, tears streaming. "No cremation. Can't burn my son. You venomous woman." You won't even let us send him on his last journey? You have no conscience. My father-in-law, tears flowing, clung to the car door. Gavin. My poor son. Staff hurriedly stepped forward to dissuade, the scene descending into chaos. I suddenly recalled the scene before death in my second life. At that time, severely injured by Gavin's collision, I lay dying over the steering wheel. My in-laws stepped out of Gavin's car, their gazes toward me filled only with the glee of a successful plan. My mother-in-law even said to Gavin, "Hurry up, throw this Jinx's body into the mountains to feed the wolves, clean and traceless, no one will find out." This memory instantly pulled me back to reality. I took a deep breath, pushed open the car door, my face showing grief. "Dad, Mom, the dead cannot be revived. It is out of respect for Gavin that we must proceed as planned, sending him off grandly. How can Gavin rest in peace with you acting like this?" I stepped forward, seemingly to support my mother-in-law. "Mom, we can't delay any longer. For Gavin's dignity, and for the sake of you two elders' health, we must proceed." Dignity? My son is almost gone, what dignity? My mother-in-law fiercely shook off my hand, her bloodshot eyes glaring at me. Seeing no further delay possible, she finally shouted, "Can't burn. My son isn't dead at all. This is murder. Murdering your own husband." These words shocked the entire assembly. All the leaders, comrades, and relatives escorting were stunned. Murdering her own husband? They looked at my mother-in-law in disbelief, then at me. Triumph gleamed in my mother-in-law's eyes, about to speak, when my tears began to fall. I lifted my face, showing no panic, only profound sorrow. "Mom, acting like this, how can Gavin depart in peace?" My mother-in-law was stunned. Choking back sobs, I looked toward the crowd, leaders, comrades. "I'm sorry to disturb everyone, but please don't blame the elderly couple, it's not easy for them. After Gavin's passing, they haven't eaten or slept, their minds are somewhat dazed. The doctor said it's a stress disorder caused by extreme grief, leading to memory confusion and uttering nonsense." I raised my eyes to look at my in-laws, my gaze devoid of any blame, only indissoluble heartache. They aren't intentionally disrupting order or slandering Gavin's sacrifice. They just love Gavin too much and can't accept this fact. These words were spoken with genuine emotion, just as in my first life when my in-laws inverted right and wrong before the investigation team. As expected, once I finished, everyone's gazes toward my in-laws turned to deep sympathy. "So that's how it is." The division commander nodded heavily, his gaze toward me filled with admiration and pity. "Serena, it's hard on you, amidst your own grief, you still consider the elders." The political commissar also sighed. "Yes, outliving one's child is too great a blow. Quickly, help the two elders to rest, call the military doctor to check." Several comrades immediately stepped forward, half supporting and half escorting the still cursing in-laws away from the hearse path. Their struggling cries, in everyone's eyes at that moment, instantly transformed into the anguish of losing a beloved son. The hearse restarted. The dirge resumed. The convoy, facing the morning light, continued resolutely toward the crematorium. The hearse slowly pulled up at the crematorium entrance, staff preparing to take over. At that moment, a white sedan screeched to a halt in front of the convoy. Melissa pushed open the car door, her voice urgent, "Wait. No cremation. The hospital just discovered an instrument malfunction, the previous brain death determination may have errors." These words exploded like thunder, the originally solemn scene instantly erupting in uproar. The leaders exchanged glances, their previously firm eyes regaining doubt. "Dr. Melissa," I quickly stepped forward to block her, "do you know how cruel it is to make the family relive the shattering of hope? Gavin has already rested in peace." Melissa glanced at me, deliberately raising her volume. "Rest in peace? Mrs. Serena, don't you want to leave Gavin a lifeline? What if he is really still alive?" This statement was impeccable. Under the silent gazes of the crowd, I had no choice but to step aside and agree to Melissa opening the coffin for inspection. As the coffin lid was slowly opened, Melissa eagerly stepped forward. But upon clearly seeing Gavin's face, she subconsciously glanced at her wristwatch, her brows furrowing. Using a blind spot in vision, Melissa heavily pinched Gavin's philtrum. Seeing no reaction from Gavin, she then ruthlessly scraped his wrist with her nail. Standing at the forefront, my in-laws stared unblinkingly at the coffin, not daring to lose focus for a moment. Time passed second by second in silence. Yet Gavin in the coffin remained motionless, his face still a lifeless pallor. "This is impossible." Cold sweat beaded on Melissa's forehead. She hurriedly bent down, whispering urgently into Gavin's ear, "Gavin! Wake up quickly." Still no response. Melissa's face turned completely pale. Impossible, the drug effect time had clearly passed. Why hadn't Gavin woken up? I saw through the panic in her eyes at a glance, leisurely adjusting my clothes. I spoke softly, "Dr. Melissa, are you satisfied now?" Melissa, colorless, supported herself on the coffin, suddenly turning her head like a madwoman and shouting, "Gavin! Wake up quickly. Time's up." She had completely lost her usual calm composure. Ignoring all the astonished gazes around, Melissa pressed her lips close to Gavin's face. Her voice carried a sob, "Gavin, you should wake up." Seeing this, my in-laws also staggered forward. My mother-in-law desperately pounded the coffin lid, her voice shrill, "Son! Open your eyes and look at Mom." My father-in-law even braced the coffin with his shoulder, roaring with tears streaming, "Gavin! If you don't wake up, you'll be burned alive." The three surrounded the coffin like clutching at life-saving straws. Melissa pressed her ear to the coffin lid, frantically searching for signs of life. My in-laws' cries had become hoarsely unrecognizable. But until the end, Gavin inside the coffin showed no reaction. Melissa's body went completely limp, nearly collapsing to the ground. Seeing her like this, my in-laws' faces gradually lost color. At that moment, my mother-in-law suddenly crawled up from the ground, pointing at me with eyes blazing, "It's you. You venomous woman tampered with something. You killed my son." My father-in-law, as if finding an outlet, raged madly, "Yes. She couldn't wait for Gavin to die. So she struck a deadly blow, fearing Gavin would wake up." Melissa, leaning on the coffin, pallidly chimed in, "Mrs. Serena, medical examinations can't be wrong. What exactly did you do to Gavin?" Upon hearing this, I instantly raised my eyes, looking at the three in disbelief. No rebuttal, no argument. Only tears. Large teardrops rolled down my pale cheeks. I could barely stand steady. You all." I raised my hand, intending to point at them, but ultimately only trembled as I clutched my chest. "Dad, Mom, Gavin is my husband, the person I love with my life." With teary eyes, I looked around, tears flowing more fiercely. How can you slander me like this? I just wanted him to depart with dignity, with honor. Is that wrong too? I, Serena, have a clear conscience." After speaking, as if unable to support myself any longer, my body went limp, collapsing to the side. "Sister-in-law." The two closest comrades quickly caught me. The division commander's face was ashen. He surveyed the completely out-of-control in-laws and Melissa, his voice filled with fury. "Enough. How long will you continue this commotion? Must you drive Serena to death, preventing Gavin from resting in peace even after death?" He stepped forward, shielding me behind him like protecting a junior at home. Since Gavin's incident, it was Serena who stayed by the bedside day and night, exhausting her tears. It was she who, suppressing her grief, ran around handling all procedures. Moreover, it was she who, with profound righteousness, enduring heart-wrenching pain, fought for the honors Gavin deserved. The division commander grew angrier as he spoke, pointing at the open coffin. "And you? Besides stirring trouble here and stabbing the child in the heart, what have you done? Do you deserve the Gavin lying inside? Do you deserve Serena's devotion?" The political commissar also stepped forward, sighing, "Raymond, sister-in-law, and this Dr. Melissa, you are too disappointing. You are desecrating the hero spirit. Come." He ordered gravely, "Escort these three comrades away. Let them go to where they should to calm down. Don't disturb the deceased's peace anymore." Several comrades immediately stepped forward, resolutely yet politely escorting my in-laws and Melissa. "No. I won't go. That's my son. My mother-in-law still struggled, but was firmly held by the soldiers. Melissa, pallid, her lips trembling, wanted to say something. But under the division commander's icy gaze, she couldn't utter a word, only being half forcibly removed from the scene. The farce ended. Leaning on a female comrade's shoulder, I took a deep breath, as if using all my strength to barely stand steady. I raised my head, forcing a bitter smile. Leaders, I want to personally send Gavin off properly alone. The division commander's eyes were full of pity. He nodded emphatically. Good child, go, we'll wait outside. The crowd slowly retreated, leaving me a quiet space. At the cremation room entrance, finally only I and that dark coffin remained. The heavy door closed behind me. Alone, I pushed the coffin, walking beside the spacious conveyor belt. The sound of wheels frictioning the ground was particularly clear in the silence. It was in this silence that a faint click sound emerged from the coffin. My steps halted. Immediately after, there was the rustling of fabric friction, accompanied by a suppressed urgent gasp. The coffin lid was suddenly propped open a crack from inside. A hand with bulging veins clung tightly to the coffin's edge. Cough. Gavin awoke. At the exact moment the fake death effect wore off, just before he was pushed into the incineration chamber. He struggled to emerge from under the coffin lid. Those once charming eyes were now filled with bewilderment. Dim lighting, cold metal conveyor belt, the high-temperature incinerator opening directly ahead. Where is this? Gavin's voice was dry and hoarse, his face gradually covered in a layer of fear. Then, he saw me. I stood beside the equipment, dressed in black. My face expressionless, calmly watching him struggle on the brink of life and death. Gavin almost instinctively squeezed out that gentle expression I was once so familiar with. His voice pleading, "Wife, what's going on?" I only remember going on a mission, then suddenly an accident. How did I get back? Even at this point, he was still lying to me. I continued watching coldly, silent. Wife, what are you trying to do? Save me quickly, I'm not dead. It must be those bastard doctors' misdiagnosis. Wife, look, I can still move, I'm alive. Misdiagnosis? A vegetative person knows quite a lot. Realizing he had slipped up, a flash of panic crossed Gavin's eyes, his tone more urgent. Wife, don't you love it when I accompany you to eat bean curd in the south of the city? We'll go tomorrow. And you said you wanted to see the snow mountains. I'll take you on my leave. What are you spacing out for? Wife, our years of affection. We grew up together, are you going to watch me die without helping? I watched Gavin's performance coldly, my face still icy. Gavin finally understood what was happening. Seeing the affection card ineffective, the disguised devotion on his face instantly peeled away. Replaced by a ferocious threat, Serena, think clearly, if you kill me, you won't escape either. Outside are all my leaders and comrades. Do you think you can get away scot-free? And your dad? If he knows you're so vicious. Vicious? I finally spoke, my voice calm without a ripple. The hot air waves from the furnace mouth distorted Gavin's figure. I slowly savored his struggling ugliness. You have the nerve to talk to me about viciousness? Gavin, do you know what death tastes like? Gavin's face stiffened. What madness are you spouting? I don't understand what you're saying, let me out quickly. You don't understand? I chuckled lightly. No, you know exactly what I'm saying. After all, this is the third time we've reached this point. Gavin's fingers clinging to the coffin edge suddenly stiffened, looking at me with uncertain alarm. I began narrating calmly, as if telling a story unrelated to me. The first time, right after your awakening. In our home, you pushed me from the top of the second-floor stairs, and I died on the spot. Gavin froze instantly. His original plan was laid bare by me without warning. The second time, I got smarter, transferred posts, thinking I could evade. Unexpectedly, this time you wanted to run me over directly. When I was half dead in the car, you and your good parents were still discussing nearby how to throw my body into the mountains to feed wolves without leaving traces. You're talking nonsense. Gavin's voice trembled, attempting to deny. Nonsense? I looked at him coldly. Then you're plotting with Melissa to make the fake death drug, is that also nonsense? After announcing your brain death, her refusing to let the family withdraw instruments, wasn't it to ensure you could wake up legitimately? And your good parents, desperately blocking the cremation earlier, what were they waiting for? Weren't they waiting for the drug effect to pass, for their precious son to rise from the dead? Hearing me reveal their conspiracy entirely, Gavin's expression instantly shifted from shock to terror. The fake death drug was from Melissa. Mom and Dad did know, but we originally just wanted to trick you into divorce. Hot air waves surged from the furnace mouth. Gavin incoherently confessed every detail, how he rekindled old flames with Melissa, how he schemed for my property, even fully disclosing the original plan to push me down the stairs. I was possessed. He looked at me sobbing, for the sake of 10 years of marriage, please forgive me this time. Right, I suddenly interrupted him, I must thank you for that will you wrote to build your persona. If not for your line unwilling to become a burden leaving your parents speechless, I would have had to rack my brains on how to get you discharged. Gavin was stunned. As memories converged bit by bit, he finally collapsed completely. He pounded the coffin madly, trying to struggle out, wife. I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please spare me. Forgive me this time. I'll be your slave from now on. I'll give you all the money. Please save me, I don't want to die. Gavin's face, now streaming with tears and snot, overlapped with the cold cruelty when he pushed me down the stairs and ran me over in previous lives. I slowly pressed the incinerator start button. Inside the furnace, flames roared up. Forgive you? Through the observation window, watching the conveyor belt start, my voice was cold as frost. That's God's business. My task is to send you to meet God. As I walked out the door, my in-laws and Melissa stumbled over. Where's my son? If anything happens to him, we won't let you off. My mother-in-law charged forward angrily, pointing at my nose and cursing. I knew you, this cheap woman, had no good intentions, we shouldn't have let you in the door back then. My father-in-law also appeared arrogant. You've made enough noise, don't push your luck. My gaze swept over their faces, tone flat. Perhaps the drug was too heavy. Gavin slept quite soundly. Melissa jerked her head up, her eyes bloodshot. Impossible. I calculated the time. As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized the slip, but it was too late. Calculated the time? I repeated her words. Calculated he should wake before cremation? Or that you could timely block the hearse? My father-in-law still tried to quibble. What nonsense are you saying? Do you know what Gavin said to me inside? He told me everything, and desperately begged me to spare him. Unfortunately, I've seen clearly what kind you are. Take your son back. I thrust the urn forward, my mother-in-law subconsciously caught it. When she realized what she was holding, she finally broke down. You murderer. You killed my son. You'll die a horrible death. I calmly watched their hysterical appearance, shaking my head. In everyone's eyes, I'm just a martyr's widow sending her husband on his final journey. And you? My gaze swept over their pallid faces. Who will believe your words anymore? In the distance, the division commander was approaching quickly with people. I turned to look at my mother-in-law. Hold your son well, first-class merit martyr. Gavin died unyieldingly. I'll kill you, avenge my son. My in-laws lunged at me like mad. I glanced back, the leaders were coming with people. Aren't you afraid I'll tell them you've gone mad from your son's death and have you sent to a mental hospital? My in-laws were stunned, the ferocity on their faces slowly turning to fear. My mother-in-law suddenly knelt with a thud, clinging tightly to my leg. Serena, with Gavin gone, we old couple can only rely on you. For Gavin's sake, you won't abandon us, right? I gently pulled my pant leg free. The martyr's pension will be deposited on time to your card. As for the rest. Under my in-laws' tense gazes, I curled my lips. I and the Gu family have no relation anymore. If you lack someone for elderly care, you can find this Dr. Melissa. Anyway, these years she and Gavin have been secretly involved, she should be happy to fulfill filial duties for him. My mother-in-law's expression stiffened, suddenly turning to the forgotten Melissa. My father-in-law slapped Melissa hard. It's all you, this vixen. Your rotten idea. Blame me? Melissa clutched her face, screaming, it was you who said as long as we eliminate her, the property is all yours. It was you who guaranteed foolproof. Otherwise, why would I agree to let my son take the risk? You killed my son. The idea was Gavin's. If not for your insatiable greed. The three immediately grappled. My mother-in-law yanked Melissa's hair, my father-in-law's fists landed on the two women. Melissa fought back, her nails drawing blood on their faces. Give back my son. You killed him. Bitch. The leaders frowned and signaled, several comrades stepped forward to separate the three. They continued tearing and cursing each other, appearing insane. I had already turned and left, not looking back at this farce. I successfully transferred from my original unit, all relations moved to a new city. After settling, I video called my father. He was vacationing by the sea, the blazing sun penetrated through the screen, warming me as well. My father's epaulets were removed, but the resoluteness between his brows remained undiminished. Only tinged with the gentleness accumulated over years. Adapting to the new environment? All good. I turned the camera around, it's very quiet here. Father was silent for a moment. I know about the Gu family matters, you handled it well. I softly mmm'd. Remember, you are first the Shin family's daughter, then other identities. No one can be your shackles. His gaze softened, tone gentle, let go of the past, live well. Dad will always be your backing. Thanks, Dad. The call ended. Outside the window, moonlight like water, I finally felt the last trace of chill on my body melt away. The new unit was located in a rainy southern city. I began learning tea brewing, flower cultivation, weekends, I went to art galleries for exhibitions. Months later, encountering an old colleague, casual chat brought up old news. He lowered his voice, the matters at your previous place later blew up big. Your former in-laws, heard they kept going to the hospital to find that female doctor, insisting she killed their son. The last time, the old lady splashed sulfuric acid on her face, reportedly, disfigured. He shook his head, sipped tea, the old couple was taken away on the spot, probably will stay inside for many years. As for that Dr. Melissa, face ruined, job lost. Didn't last 2 months, despaired at home, and passed. I listened quietly, gaze sweeping the bright sunlight outside. Is that so? I said softly. The tea in the cup was warm and suitable, just like my current calm state of mind. Those past events, those calculated conspiracies, were like ashes scattered by the wind. No longer stirring the slightest ripple in my heart. I pushed open the window, early summer wind carrying floral scent rushed in. This time I finally crossed the perilous boundary of life and death. The future life is full of light,